Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Marie Herman, and I'm the owner of MRH Enterprises LLC. I am so happy to be here this week hosting Executive Support Magazine's Admin Chat webinar. For the next 60 minutes, we are going to be taking a look at creating your career development plan. I want to give you an idea of the ways that you could look ahead in your career to decide what's the right choice for you. How do you decide if you should stay at your current company? Should you move to a different company? Are you thinking about maybe starting your own business? We have options, we have choices in what we can do with our career. And ultimately, our career is in our own hands. So I want to give you some guidance as to figure out, what do you want to be when you grow up? Where are you going to go from here? During this next hour, we're going to talk about what is a career development plan? Why would you want to have one? How do you put one together? What kind of information should it have? How often should you revisit it? And what should you do if you actually don't know where to start, if you're completely lost as to where to go from here? Instead of floating around like a leaf caught in the current of a river, you want to be sitting down and giving some thought to exactly where you would like to end up in the future. You can then take focused, intentional steps towards achieving that goal. So when the opportunity appears and the door to your ideal job opens, you will be prepared to step through that doorway and claim it. A career development plan is essentially a way of establishing your intentions for your career and then mapping out a strategy for making your intentions reality. So, where do you want to be? A lot of us get that question posed during a job interview. It's the classic, where do you want to be in 5 years? And it always feels like we can't answer that honestly. Because if we say what we really want, which is maybe the interviewer's job, they're not going to want to hire us potentially. But on the other hand, if we say, I'm looking to be in the exact same position with no change whatsoever, well, nobody believes that either. So it's really a question that makes most job searchers very, very uncomfortable. But it is a really good question to ask yourself and to have an answer for, even if you don't share that answer with any companies you might be working for. What do you want to be when you grow up? What would you like your next step to be in your career? Now, maybe you're of a certain age where you're pretty close to retirement. And maybe you're just thinking, I'm going to stay in the current job that I'm in until I retire. And that's perfectly fine. If you have that luxury that your job is secure and that you enjoy it enough that working for it for the remainder of your career is a good place to be, go for it. I certainly wouldn't tell you any differently. In fact, I think that really is the dream for a lot of people, to find a job that they would be happy enough to stay with until they retired. So that's totally great. That is fantastic. But most employees would probably have a little different answer. And most employees are probably not quite so confident in how secure their job actually is. And they may not love their job so much that they really want to do that until they retire. So it's worth spending a little time thinking about, where do you want to go next? And more importantly, where do you want to end up? Because it's a lot easier to make incremental, small changes and end up in your final destination than it is to just kind of meander freely and then at the last minute try to jump over 5 lanes because you weren't ready for the exit that was coming up. So, what can we do? And why would we start with a career development plan? I love this quote from the classic Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. It says, Alice asked the Cheshire Cat, who was sitting on a tree, what road do I take? The cat asked, where do you want to go? I don't know, Alice answered. Then, said the cat, it really doesn't matter, does it? And I think that is very true. If you don't have any end goal in mind, then it really doesn't matter what your next job is. You could be a car mechanic. You could be an executive assistant to a Fortune 500 CEO. You could be the receptionist for a nonprofit company. Makes no difference because you don't have an end goal in mind. So, if you really want to take an efficient path, you want to think first about where you want to end up. What do you wish your last job would be when you're done before retirement? And maybe that answer is I want to be the assistant to the CEO of a top technology company working in the healthcare field. If you can get that specific, that will help you tremendously because that then tells you which jobs in the interim, in the middle between those two positions of where you are now and where you're going make sense. So you could look at if that were your plan, I want to support the CEO of a healthcare technology firm. Okay, then if I'm looking at getting a job at a library, that doesn't necessarily match up with that career path. If I'm looking at getting a job in the automotive industry, that doesn't necessarily match up with that career path of technology and healthcare. So, having that vision in mind of where you're trying to get to will be helped tremendously along the way for your career path by being able to make wise choices that will get you to that ultimate solution you're working towards. And you really do want to think carefully about this. The pandemic has given us a golden opportunity to pause in some respects. Now, I know some of you are saying, pause? What pause? I've been working like crazy the whole pandemic. I get that. But a lot of us were forced to work from home. We were given time that we might not have had otherwise. And our lives were pretty much turned upside down. This quote from Dave Hollis: in the rush to return to normal, use this time to consider which parts of normal are worth rushing back to. You might have seen on the news that there is a great resignation taking place across I don't know how many countries are impacted. It's very, very big here in the United States, and I would imagine it's affecting other countries as well. It is people essentially reaching the end of their patience and deciding with this pandemic that they don't want to go back to normal. They don't want to go back to sitting in an office 5 days a week. They don't want to go back to life as usual. They want to make a change. And people have done all kinds of things. Some have been quite drastic. People have moved across country. Being remote in many positions allows you a lot more flexibility of your time and freedom of movement. So, in some cases, people are relocating to parts of the country that they've dreamed of living in, but weren't able to previously because they had to be in an office. I've seen some reports of people choosing to move across country and not even telling their employer and just figuring, well, when the time comes, if I have to, I'll quit and I'll find something locally. I wouldn't recommend that particular path, but I think it is important to really stop and think about if you were to go back to what was considered normal prior to the pandemic, do you really want to take on all those parts? Do you want to have the same stress level? Do you want to have the same hours? Do you want to have the same commute? And again, maybe your answer is yes. Maybe your answer is yeah, it was perfectly fine. I loved it before. I didn't have any problems with it at all. Okay, that's great. But if the answer is, you know what, no, I would like to have a greater work life balance. I would like to be able to spend time with my family. I would like to have a less stressful job. I would like to find bosses that trust me more. I feel like my boss kind of micromanaged me during this pandemic because they really didn't trust the work that I was doing. And I want to get away from that. If that's the case, then start thinking about what you are moving towards, what you want your career to become, not just what you want your career to get away from. So, how do you put together a career plan? And what format does that even take? Is there a template for it? Yeah, there's probably templates out there in the world, I'm sure. But the format really can be entirely up to you. Maybe you might be the kind of person that prefers to write things down. In which case, an essay format, sitting down and just free writing whatever comes to your mind when you think about your career and the future and what you love and don't love about your past jobs and what you really are hoping to get with the future jobs. Uh, Use that format if that's going to work best for you. Create an essay or some kind of a journal to write out all your thoughts. Maybe you're more of a visual person and you might like to use a vision board instead. That's another option that's available to you. And so this could be taking pictures out of magazines or screen clippings from the web of things that you are working towards, whatever symbolizes the life that you want to create for yourself. And maybe that's something really simple, maybe that's something quite complex, but you want to find something that matches up with your personality. And don't worry about whether or not society agrees with you in what your thoughts are. It doesn't matter what society thinks. It doesn't matter if society thinks this is a good job or a bad job. This is what you should be doing. Makes no difference. Do what is going to ultimately make you happy and fulfilled. Maybe you would prefer to do an audio or a video recording. Just turn on the camera and start recording yourself. That's another option that's available to you. You might find it helpful to talk to a friend or a family member, someone who's non judgmental and someone who's really good at listening and letting you talk and just kind of let it all out there. And then let them maybe ask some questions that might help clarify for you what is the right career path for you. By spending a little time figuring out what your ideal life looks like, and this is bigger than just your job, you have a chance to look at all the parts of your life and evaluate how happy or unhappy you are with them. So, this could include family, this could include your spirituality, this could include your home, this could include your community that you live in, as well as things like your job. It can be everything to just take a little time and think about if I had my dream life, and by dream life, I'm not talking about if I won the lottery. I'm not talking about those crazy dreams that are just not realistic of I would jet to Paris on my own private plane. And I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. I'm talking about the very realistic, everyday life that you could get up and be living on a reasonable salary. So, again, I'm not looking at something where, oh, I would be paid £1 million a year. I'm not going that crazy. Just something that is realistic and maybe a little more money than you're currently making, but not, quadruple the income. Spend some time really thinking that through. And so I'm just going to talk, for the rest of this time about the career portion of that process. But I actually really do encourage you to think beyond just the job. Think about that career as a whole and where you think you would like to end up. In my own life, I've gone through this process myself. Back in 2013, I was facing a lot of debt. My husband had been unemployed during the Great Recession for a year and then 14 months. So it was a long time to not have a steady income for half of the income we were used to getting. And I wasn't happy in my job. Now, I worked for a great place, I worked for a fantastic company. But I had been doing the job for several years. It had gotten a little tedious, a little boring, and I really wanted to do something else. And I had actually reached the point where I was burnt out on my career. I didn't want to be an administrative professional anymore. And so I sat down and I really thought about what would I want to become? What do I want to do? What would my great life look like? And I wrote it all down. And I found it was very simple. It wasn't, like I said, it was not, I want to live on an island in the Caribbean with a cabana boy waving a fan over my head. And, it wasn't that kind of a life. It was, I want to get up in the morning, maybe work for an hour or two because I'm an early bird and I do some of my best work very early in the morning, like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. And then when my husband gets up, I want to have breakfast with my husband. I want to pack him a lunch, send him off to work because in my dream life, he was not at home with me. Don't tell him I said that. Oh, goodness. Sorry. Then I want to work for a couple of hours. I'd like to be able to take a couple of hours for lunch. I want to have flexibility that if I want to watch a movie at lunchtime, I want to do that and not worry about, people calling on me and emailing me and all the things that have to be taken care of that very minute. I want to have control and flexibility over my time. So I might take a 2-hour lunch if I want to. And then I'll work for a couple of hours in the afternoon. My husband would come home from work. We would have dinner together. I would have cooked dinner for him. I would have kept the house reasonably picked up and neat. And we go to bed in the evening. I work from home in this dream life, and I'm able to be visited by my two cats regularly during the day. So in 2013, that was not my life. That was not my life. But January of 2014, I started my own business. I grew it within 3 years to make as much money as my day job. By the end of 2017, I quit my day job to actually go full time with my business. And I'm very happy to say that I am now living my dream life. I literally have my schedule, like I just explained. If I want to take a 2-hour lunch and watch a movie, I do that. If I want to meet a friend for lunch, I do that. I don't worry about the time in that respect. I work when I want to. I have control over my time. I'm location independent. I can work anywhere in the world. And I've been able to support my elderly mother in law with some health issues that she's had, where she's had surgery. And I've been able to work from her house and help her with recuperating. I literally am living my dream life. And the reason I'm able to do that is I sat down and I thought about what that dream life looked like. And then I started taking steps to get there. I could have chosen a different path. And I gave a lot of thought at the beginning of this process to what's the right path for me. So, one of the thoughts I considered was I could become a trainer, speaking at conferences, doing a lot of corporate speaking, and doing a lot of travel and see the world. And I did think about that briefly because I really enjoy traveling. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the reason that I enjoy traveling is I'm not doing it all the time. I actually find travel very disruptive to my life. I find it kind of exhausting. So even though I love doing it, I love going to see new places and trying the food there and learning about the culture and all that fun stuff. I don't want to do it all the time. I want to do it when I want to do it a couple times a year maybe, but I didn't want to be doing it all the time. I didn't want to be on the road all the time giving presentations. So that was a deliberate choice on my part. One I was very thankful for when the pandemic came. But it was because I really sat and thought about, is that the life I would want to be living? Would I really want to work to own a business that involved 50% or 75% travel? And I made a very serious conscious choice that that was not the ideal life I wanted. Mine would be no more than like 5% travel, if that. And so that's what I want you to do is think through based on your skill set, based on your interests, based on your passions, what do you like doing? What are you good at doing? I want you to put it all together and come up with the ideal solution for you as to what kind of a job you want, or what kind of a business you might want to start, or what kind of a career path you might want to take if you want to transition to a different career path. It's having it all come together. And the core of that lies in identifying what your ideal life is. So, what we're working towards here is a Japanese concept called ikigai, where it is your reason for being. How do you bring together all these kind of diverse threads of what you like doing and what you might want to do and what you might get paid for? How do you bring that all together? And Ikigai is this lovely model that pulls together the strands of your passion, your mission, your vocation, and your profession. So if you look at these circles, what they start with is what do you love to do? And then what are you good at? Because, of course, what we love doing is not necessarily what we're good at. And then what does the world actually need? What is something where you can fulfill a need? And who is willing to pay to address that need? And so when you find the overlap between these four circles, you end up with your own personal ikigai. And this is where you actually will be in the sweet spot of doing something that you love doing, that you're good at, and that people respect you enough to pay you for your services. So that's kind of what I would encourage you to be thinking about in terms of where to go next, especially if you're feeling dissatisfied, if you're feeling like you're not using your gifts properly and sharing yourself with the world, so to speak. Really spend time thinking this part through. And I think you'll find it will help you tremendously once you have identified that sweet spot in the middle. It changes everything for you because, again, it helps you identify what you should be saying no to, not just what you should be saying yes to. You'll want to spend some time thinking about where you are in your current job. How do you feel about your commute? How do you feel about your company environment? Do you like being in the size of company that you're in? Maybe you would rather be in a small startup, kind of a scrappy fighting kind of company that is very focused and working together towards one vision, and everybody wears different hats because they don't have enough employees. Maybe that's the environment where you thrive. Maybe the environment where you thrive is actually more Fortune 500, a very large company with a big training budget where everyone has very clearly defined roles and there's a very clearly defined chain of command. Maybe that's actually your preference. Maybe you like the orderliness of that kind of an environment. It's There's no right or wrong answers. It's what's right for you. That's what matters. Think about your job responsibilities. What are you doing at your present job? And how much do you like or dislike those responsibilities? And if you could shift the percentages around, what would you do with the percentages of your time? Maybe in my own case, it would be I love doing things like live event planning. I loved putting together live events, that kind of meeting planning. So that's something that if I were still in the work world, I would choose to find a job that expanded those kinds of responsibilities because they were fun for me. And then I would look for jobs that minimized the parts of the jobs that I didn't like filing, for example, or expense reports. Look at your salary. Is your salary where it needs to be? And what can be done about it? Is it something where you could go in and have a discussion with your current employer to improve your salary? Do you need to move to a different company? Do you need to stay within the same company but move to a different position? Do you need to look at a different career path because where you are now is as high as you're ever going to go? Um, that is a very personal decision. But knowing how important salary is, as far as what's the salary I need to get to live that dream life I'm thinking about. Do I need to add some additional training? Do I need to get a degree? Do I need to identify what the skill set is and the requirements to move up to the next level in my career path? That's going to dictate our salary very often. Think about your colleagues. How do you feel about your colleagues and your boss? What do you like or dislike about working with them? Is it their sense of humor? Is it their style of management? Is it their personalities? Is it their knowledge and the respect you feel for them based on what they know? How do you feel about your colleagues? And looking back over your past jobs, what are the qualities that you have liked or disliked in your colleagues? And sometimes we have sort of a very top level, surface level thought of that of, well, I want people who are honest and I want people who have a sense of humor. But dig a little deeper in there and really think through what were the qualities in the coworkers that I loved working with? What were really the qualities that I loved about them? And then think about your career path forward. What is the next role that you want to work towards? And more importantly, what's the last role that you want to work towards? So take some time to identify what that dream job is. What title would you have? What kind of company would it be? What would your boss be like at that company? What's your salary there? What are your working conditions? How much are you working? How often are you doing overtime? How often are you being called in the middle of the night or on the weekends? Are you working at home or are you working in an office? What kind of responsibilities do you have? What hours are you working on a regular basis? Do you have control over those hours? Do you have the choice of, well, I want to work on Mondays, but I don't want to work on Fridays. And I want to find a job that doesn't make me work on Fridays. I want 3-day weekends every week. Identify what is your dream job. And then you can start looking at the job postings and thinking about the industries and looking at the various companies out there and putting together the ideal job potential for you. And this all goes back to what that ideal day actually would look like that we were talking about earlier. If you could put together an ideal day for yourself, and again, think about that in the context of your entire life, not just the job part, what would it look like? What would a typical work week look like? And get as specific as you can. What kind of tasks are you working on? Are you on the computer? Are you doing something more hands on? Are you around people? Are you immersed in spreadsheets because you love working with numbers? Are you getting up on stage and talking in front of people? What are you doing? What are the tasks that you're actually doing in this ideal dream job of yours? And again, don't just think about what you hate or what you're trying to avoid. That can be a start, but that's not what you want to think of as the end product. The end product is, what do you want to move towards? Where do you want to go? Don't be looking in the rearview mirror the whole time that you're driving. You want to be looking at the panorama ahead of you and figuring out what your destination is. Determine what lies between your present and future locations. So, this is the step where you are going to do a gap analysis. What is it going to take to get from your current beginning point to the end point that you are envisioning? Can it be done in one step? Is it a one step that it's my next logical job? Or is it going to take two or three steps in the middle in order to be prepared for that final opportunity that you're looking for? What skills are you going to need? And how do you find that out? So, one of the ways that you can get a sense of that is take a look at things like job postings. Look for the title that you are looking for. Let's say you decide, I want to become a chief of staff at that healthcare technology company. Well, start looking for chief of staff positions at healthcare technology positions at healthcare technology companies. Look at those job postings. What are the skills that are being asked for? What programs do they expect you to know? Do they ask for certain certifications? Are they asking for certain college experience or other type of experience? What people do you need to know to get into that industry? Maybe this is something where you should join an association that matches up with the industry that you want to move into. Healthcare, for example, or maybe women in tech, as an example, or maybe something else entirely. What experience do you need to acquire in order to be ready for that job when it opens up? Now, you might find by looking at the job description that you're ready now. Oh my gosh, look at this job. It's perfect for me. I'm absolutely qualified for it. I can apply for it right now. Then go ahead, apply for it. Make that dream happen, people. But for most of us, we'll probably find there's a number of items on that list that we don't have experience with yet. And we might not even know what they are. Now you know what you need to learn about. Because previously you didn't know what you didn't know. Now you know what you don't know. So you have an idea of what you need to get some experience with. There's a lot of ways to get experience. You might ask people, like, for example, if you're supposed to learn a certain software, you might ask people that work with that software if they could show you around in it a little bit just to get you familiar with it. You might do YouTube videos or go to LinkedIn and do the LinkedIn learning. There are a number of different ways to learn new skills. You could check out books on the subject. There, you could ask at your workplace if it's something that your workplace has, like maybe it's Visio or something. Maybe you could ask to take that on and say that that's an area that you would like to explore and learn better. And maybe in that process, you realize while you're doing it that this is not something you enjoy doing. And that's very valuable information to recognize. Oh, you know what? I thought I would like this. I thought I was working towards this as my ultimate job. But now that I'm getting more deeply invested in it, I realize, no, I'm not loving this as much as I thought I would. It's not as glamorous as I thought it was. I remember early in my career as an admin, one of the jobs I initially was thinking about working towards was a Fortune 500 CEO position. And I did actually land one. I was supporting the chairman emeritus of a Fortune 500 company. But I realized that I didn't love the particular work of of actually supporting a CEO of that type of company, because very often there's an environment that goes with that C suite, and it's very demanding. It's often a 24/7 kind of position. You might be on call at 4 o'clock in the morning if your executive needs you. It might be a you might feel kind of tethered to your desk at some companies, not every company, of course, but there's some companies where it almost feels like you are so in demand, you are so much required to be there that you have to ask permission to go to the bathroom practically. Someone has to be answering that phone every moment. In some of those suites, they don't want it going to voicemail. So I found that in certain companies, that really wasn't what I was aspiring to. I didn't want to be in that kind of a situation. It's very important to me to feel like I have freedom with my time. And so that started even years before I started my own business. But it became more and more of a driving factor over time, until it finally became the reason why I started my business, is that I wanted to have complete control over my time. I wanted to decide for myself how many hours I was going to work, how many days a week I was going to work, how many clients, in my case, how many classes I was going to offer. Um, and that really was something that, to a certain extent, I there's there's a line in the sand of what you can imagine that may or may not match up with what the reality is when you actually experience it. So you need to be prepared to recognize that this dream that you've been working towards, the closer you get to it, the more you may realize, nope, I've changed my mind. And that's okay. It's perfectly reasonable and good, in fact, to adapt to your reality and say, I recognize now that I have more experience with this, this is not what I want to do. This is not the path I want to go down. And then just reevaluate at that point. Okay, so how are we going to change? What are we going to go to instead? But in general, you're going to be looking at your present position, and then you're going to develop a strategy for how you're going to get to that end position. And so put together a list of what are the key steps that it's going to take to get to that position. That might include, I already mentioned, reviewing the ideal job postings, but maybe talking to someone that currently holds that role. You could interview several people that hold similar roles that you're looking at, and ask them about their experience, their background, how did they decide to get that position, what are the best things about that position, what are the things that they don't love about about that position. Just do the equivalent of an informational interview to get more general knowledge about what it's like to hold that position. What's it like to be them? And the more you talk to them, the more you may realize that, yes, this is it. This is what clicks for me. This is what I want to be doing. Or you may realize, nope, I need to adjust a bit. I need to pivot. That's not exactly what I want to be doing. because of this, because it has this responsibility. Maybe you don't want to do board meetings, or maybe you don't want to do travel arranging or whatever. So you can figure out from these conversations, from looking at the job postings, which jobs are likely to include the tasks that you love doing and the tasks that you would rather avoid, and use that to guide you in choosing the right jobs as you move forward. You could also try talking to a recruiter. They may be able to give you some guidance on feedback that they've gotten from their clients as to what kind of personality would be successful in that role, what skill set would be most useful for those roles. So use that as part of your strategy for determining how you're going to get to that job. And then every step in between should be filling in a gap of experience or knowledge that you need. So, if what you need is experience in the technology world, then maybe that's the logical place for your next job. If it's the healthcare world, then maybe that's the logical place. Maybe it's a lateral move into the industry just so you can get the experience in the industry. And then from there, you move up to something else. So there's a lot of different routes that you can take to get anywhere, but you need to figure out what that end destination is to know which route is the logical path to take. Create a set of SMART goals for yourself that are going to allow you to reach your ideal job within a certain time frame. And then break those steps out into smaller increments. If you start with a 5 year plan, then break it out into 5 1 year goals, for example. Then break the next year out into 12 monthly steps so that you're going to be making progress. Set some key milestones for yourself and some dates for achieving them, and put those on your calendar along with reminders. Like anything in life, your goals will not happen if you don't find a way to incorporate them into your daily life. So often, we set New Year's resolutions. Hey, this is it. This is the year. I'm going to do this. And by January 5th, we have thrown them aside already. We've already given up on them. Doesn't have to be that way, though. Think about why your goals have slipped in the past. Why haven't you been able to make progress towards your ultimate goals? You'll find there's probably a couple of key elements for where you've been successful and where you've not been successful. One is having a clearly defined goal. I do something called Pomodoro techniques, which is where I get together with someone. I've been doing a lot of them virtually lately, and we check in on the equivalent of Zoom. We check in at the beginning and we say what we're going to work on. And then we work on it. We both mute ourselves and we work on camera together for 25 to 50 minutes. And then at the end of that time period, we report in with our progress on what we got done. It is amazing how well focused you are during that kind of a session, because it forces you at the beginning to state your intention of how you're going to spend your time. Setting goals for yourself is much the same when it comes to your career plan. It states your intention of what you're going to do next. Sometimes that's the hardest part. Sometimes making that choice is the hardest part of the process. That I have too many great ideas. I have too many things that I'm interested in. I can't decide what the one right career path is for me. But you don't have to decide only one right path necessarily, but you're thinking more along the lines of what's the next step. And then in terms of that one right path, recognizing that I could have 5 or 10 or 15 right paths, but I'm going to choose one of them to work towards. And then everything else falls into place. Every other job immediately either supports your goals or detracts from your goals. And it makes it much more clear when you're looking at something like a pro and con list. That's the ultimate question of, does this support what I'm working towards, or does it not? Does it detract from what I'm working towards? If your goal is, I want to be home with my kids, I want to have that kind of freedom where I could work from home and I could take care of my kids at home and I don't have to put them into daycare, or I'll have them maybe still in daycare, but I'll be more accessible to them during the day. I'll be able to attend their school events and things like that. If that's your goal, then you can eliminate every job that doesn't support that goal. So it instantly clarifies your priorities and your choices for you. That process of breaking down the strategies and the tactics, this is also where we tend to slide. We tend to set a goal up front, but we don't really think through how are we going to make it happen. We may or may not use technology to help us. I try to use technology to set goals by doing alarms on my phone that will pop up and remind me to do something. I'll put notes on my calendar on certain days and times, asking for progress reports. How is this project coming? I will block out time to do active work on certain things. I'm in the process of doing a rather large project right now. I'm putting 2 hours on my calendar every week to make progress towards that goal. So, using technology is one way that you can do that. You could also choose to incorporate some other elements, like physical elements, if it's a goal that needs something physical associated with it. So, if your goal is, I'm going to become an executive assistant, and to do that, I believe I need Microsoft Office Specialist certification. Well, then buy the book and carry the study guide with you everywhere that you go, so it's always accessible. And anytime that you have a few spare minutes between meetings or on your lunch hour, you can be reading through that book and preparing for that certification exam. That's an example of using something physical to help keep you on track, because sometimes it's out of sight, out of mind. And so if you don't have something to remind you that, hey, you're supposed to work on this goal today, the urgent will overcome the important. And I love that quote. I've seen it somewhere out there that when you do not have prioritization of your goals, then whatever is urgent on your plate will swamp whatever is important, which means somebody standing in front of you at your desk talking is urgent, and that's going to make everything else you're working for or on be set aside. That's an example of that. So, when it comes to setting your strategies and tactics, it's identifying what's important and how do I ensure that I allow time on my schedule to work on these important tasks and not let them all get wiped out by urgent tasks, which may or may not be important. All of these steps together can help you to make forward progress on these goals that you have set. And in this case, your goal is front and center. I want the career to be the career of my dreams. I want to work towards being absolutely fulfilled and content, if not thriving, in the career of my choice, in the job that I'm doing. I want to feel valued. I want to feel respected. I want to feel like I'm making a contribution to the greater good in some fashion. So, next, you'll be looking at identifying obstacles and developing strategies for overcoming those obstacles, because there will always be obstacles in our life. There will always be something getting in the way of achieving our goals. And so, as much as you can, try to identify those obstacles ahead of time, because then you can develop strategies to deal with them. Whereas if we don't, if we just kind of float along, like I said, that leaf on the river, and we're just going wherever fate takes us, we may find that we never get to our ultimate destination. We get derailed by the obstacles that we encounter along the way. So, by thinking through what those obstacles are and developing the strategies, you're going to be so much better prepared for any situation that gets thrown at you. Maybe your ideal job becomes available before you've gotten all your ducks in a row of being perfectly prepared for it and totally qualified. Well, you could have a strategy to work around that, a plan in place for how I'm going to develop this skill, an answer prepared for an interview of how you're planning to get a certain skill set, or how you will be able to work around that for them not having that skill, but here's how I'm valuable anyway for your company. Obstacles could be internal, especially in a career path. There may be a lack of confidence. There might be low self esteem. You might be afraid of applying for a job. You might be afraid that your current boss will hear about it and you'll get fired. There's a lot of internal fears and anxieties when it comes to our careers, and those can be the biggest obstacles of all. Sometimes they are insidious. We don't even realize that we have them, and we don't realize how they're holding us back. Obstacles can be external, lack of training and education, for example, lack of money. And so that's a different kind of challenge, and you have to have some strategies for how you're going to overcome it. If I don't have a supportive boss who will send me to conferences to get the training that I need to develop my skills, then I need to get creative in how I'm going to get that skill set. Maybe I'm going to do it all through YouTube videos. Maybe I'm going to do it through books from the library. Maybe I don't have the finances to support paying for it all myself. Maybe I will start doing it, but I am going to have to save up money for it. So maybe my plan is I'm going to go to a conference every other year because that's how long it's going to take me to save up and be ready for it. But what it really comes down to is being willing to make an investment in yourself, whether that is an investment of money or an investment of time or an investment of resources or something else entirely. When you want to advance yourself, you're going to need to do something to invest in yourself to get there. And some obstacles might be a combination. Maybe your internal obstacle of being super shy might be preventing you from building a network to further your career, which would be an external obstacle. So it's not uncommon that these will overlap. They're not, perfectly cut and dried sometimes, but it's really thinking through, if that job were open today, why wouldn't I be qualified for it? Why wouldn't they hire me? And what can I do about that now? So that when that job does come available day after tomorrow, you actually are ready for it. You have prepared. You have taken care of the whatever the discrepancies are that they're looking at and realized, now I actually am qualified for that job. There's also some pretty well documented, I think, although I haven't gone looking for the studies on it, examples that in general, there's a certain element of gender to this. Men will be much more inclined to apply for a job if they meet even a couple. If there's 10 requirements for that job, if a man meets three or four of them, on average, most men will apply for that job and they'll figure, I'll figure out the remaining tasks. I'll figure out how to do it before I even have to start doing the job. I'll learn it. They essentially have confidence in themselves that they can figure it out. Women will tend to not apply for a job unless they can check off like nine or all 10 of those 10 requirements. And so they will talk themselves out of even applying because they think they're not good enough, because they think they're not prepared. And so that's a significant obstacle where we are often getting in our own way. And it's not the outside world holding us back in that situation. It's squarely on our own shoulders. So, really paying attention to those kinds of feelings and those limiting beliefs that you might have that are stopping you from pursuing your dreams, that's worth spending a little time on. So, how often should you revisit or revise this career development plan of yours? I would suggest that you revisit it at least quarterly for a review. But you also need to find a way to incorporate your goals into your daily tasks, your weekly planner, your monthly calendar. You need to figure out a way to put it front and center so that you have focus on it every day of the year. That's how you're really going to make progress. Even if it is something very, very small. I stuck a stamp on an envelope today for an application and I mailed it off. That is progress. Every small step that you take is going to advance your goals. But if you put something on your calendar for quarterly and then you don't look at it again until the week before that next quarterly update is due, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to change. And that is how years can slip away without us achieving our goals. Maybe the goal was I'm going to sit for the certified administrative professional exam. Let's go for it. And yet somehow we never get around to signing up for the exam. We put it off, we put it off, we put it off. This happens with a lot of our goals because we don't actually create a plan for ourselves to move it forward. Okay, I'm going to find a study buddy. I'm going to join a study group. I'm going to buy the book. I'm going to sign up. I'm going to register for the exam. Those are all steps that you could be taking. And you can incorporate those steps into your weekly activities so that you were making regular progress towards your goal. Big goals, like the CAP exam, for example, don't happen with one day of prep. It's a lot of time and effort put into studying a lot of different materials before you're ready for that exam. But it has to start somewhere. That classic journey of 1,000 miles will always start with the first step. No matter how small the steps are, as long as you continue taking them, consistency is what will help you achieve goals far more than any other factor. Consistently applying some effort to it over as often a period of time as you can is what's going to make your goals come true. For sure, you're going to want to review the whole plan annually, but that really is too little. Be looking at it quarterly and really ideally monthly to say, have I made progress towards this? What have I done this month towards doing this? I have a weekly planner. My master calendar is in Outlook, it's electronic, but I have a paper weekly planner that I use and I keep it on my desk. And it shows me all my meetings and appointments, but also my tasks and goals that I'm working towards. And in my own case, I choose a word of the year. So my word of the year for 2022 is complete. And complete works for me on a number of different levels. I sometimes will start projects and then not finish them. And I have several things that I would like to do where I just want to get through the entire process. And so, what I've done is to keep it front and center for myself. Every week in my weekly planner, I write in big letters across the bottom corner of it, what will I complete this week? And it's just that reminder for myself. Number one, that my word of the year is complete so that I constantly am thinking about how do I finish it. And number two, so that I am incorporating it into my weekly plans. And I should have something to write down every week that I've done, even if it is to use the old joke floating around, I finished off the package of Oreo cookies. It still is about how do I keep this in top of mind? Because otherwise, it really is out of sight, out of mind. And we have so much other noise out there. There's so many other things competing for our attention that if we're not paying attention to it, time slips away. And before we know it, it's gone and we cannot get it back, and we will not have even started making progress towards our goals, much less achieved them. So, if you're looking for some additional resources to explore this further, there's two things I would suggest. One is a book called Life Scripts: What to Say to Get What You Want in Life's Toughest Situations. That is by Stephen Pollan and Mark Levine. Life Scripts is a really nice book that is literally just comprised of potential conversations. They set up different scenarios and then they give you suggestions for what to say. And then it's sort of like a finish your own story book where you get to pick the ending. In this case, they will say, what was the response to your proposal? Like, I want to get a promotion. Well, what was the response from your boss? Was it negative? Was it neutral? Or was it positive? And then based on the response, it will give you suggestions for scripts to follow to finish out that conversation in with the intention of getting what you want. So it's actually a very nice book. It's got a ton of different scenarios in it. It's all the book is different scenarios for difficult conversations and how to handle them and what to say based on the responses that you get. And then the second resource I would suggest is a video. It's a TEDx talk. Bill Burnett did a video. I want to say it's about 25 minutes long total, maybe, called Five Steps to Designing the Life You Want. He is an instructor at Stanford, I believe, and has done a number of scientific studies and has created a class at Stanford for students to teach them how to design the life that they want. He is a former designer. And so he brought the engineering perspective to this. And it's a very interesting talk. I would definitely encourage you to check out that video as well. So I hope that you have enjoyed this admin chat on how to create a career development plan for yourself. I hope it's got your mind, the wheels turning in your mind for what can you do to get to that ideal final job that you are trying to get to. I did want to let you know that I do provide online study groups for the Certified Administrative Professional, the Microsoft Office Specialist exams. I also provide ongoing webinars and seminars that are advanced Microsoft Office training, technology topics, career development topics. So if you would like to learn more, please visit my website, www.mrhenterprises.com, and check out the classes that I offer. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with other people and mark it down below to like it, and then subscribe to Executive Support Magazine's channel so that you'll get notifications of future admin videos as well. Thank you so much for joining me for this presentation. I really appreciate you being here, and I hope that you enjoyed it as well. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.